Hi, I'm Alex from Communion Architects. We're architects that look to transform spaces in order to transform people's lives. In this series of podcasts, we're really passionate about opening up the creative process and the construction process that we feel is hidden from most people. The basis of these podcasts is a series of interviews, and every time we complete a build project, we photograph the projects, but we also ask people to describe the process and how they found it. That's a huge learning point for ourselves. But what we're finding is there's just so much value in these conversations, and therefore we've asked permission for these conversations to be opened up. So if you're thinking about doing a build project, you can have the benefit of people's previous experiences. Now with this one, living in Herefordshire, I really love this project. James and Suzanna bought a cider apple orchard in North Herefordshire, one of the most stunning places in the world, and this is part of their future life, that they wanted to make their own cider, but also to make their own cider from their own cider orchard. And after 2 years of looking and searching, they'd almost given up, this opportunity came up, and they got to buy their cider orchard. And it came with a historic Herefordshire house, Pool House Farm. What's really interesting is they fell in love with this cider orchard, and they really quite liked the house too. But there were some problems with the house. It was dark, it was damp, and even though it was in relatively close proximity to the cider orchard, when you were inside the house, you had no appreciation of where you were. Because it's a historic house, because it's got thick walls, it's got small windows, beautiful in its own right, rich with history. But for both James and Suzanna, it felt very detached from why they'd bought the house, the rolling Herefordshire countryside, the cider orchard, their life in the drinks industry. And so we worked with them in order to create a project, adapt to reimagine this house, both in order to address the fabric issues that were inherent with this historic house, but also to create a living space within this house that connected their life to the landscape that they loved. And I think what's interesting in this one is they were quite surprised about how architects work, and I think there's some really nice learnings in there about how different architects and how we approach the project. A lot of architects will approach it in a quite particular way, and you'll hear some of that within this podcast. Also, I think there's something that's really particular, that a vast majority of the design of projects is done for the act of construction, because you need to know what you're going to do, then you have to have those works costed competitively, and then you do those works. However, at Communion, part of our on-site service is close monitoring of the works on site, because yes, we will do the works and make sure the works that we've designed will get done. However, what we mustn't do is, when you're doing those works and when you're opening up and doing the investigations, you must take stock, because there are some real opportunities. And in this podcast, what I really loved in this interview was that James and Suzanna really talked about the chimney, which was a fabric issue. We had to do some investigations, and then there was discussions and conversations on site about how we treat this chimney. And now, because that was a successful process, that's one of the key spaces within the house, and everyone loves it. So I invite you to pull up a chair, whatever you're doing. You may be listening online on the motorway, and just enter this conversation.
So I'm James Forbes. I'm the cider maker at Little Pomona Cider, which is our own cider, here in Thornbury in North East Herefordshire.
My name's Suzanna Forbes. I'm one half of Little Pomona Orchard and Cidery, and we're sitting here in our house, the Pool House. I'm also a journalist and drinks writer. We're in the typical sort of orchard area, and we're very lucky because we found an orchard. So it took us 2 years to find this lovely orchard, but it comes with a lovely old house. for that house, for us, we wanted to open it up so we could see the vista. So that's what we've done, and now we can actually see the orchard, which is the reason we're here. It looks a typical old, small cottage for Herefordshire. So there's a local brick, there's the roof, it's quite small. Inside, it's got the sort of through bedrooms upstairs. So we have got 3 bedrooms, but the third one is through the second. So you get the picture that it's from sort of olden days, and the sitting room has the most amazing, huge fireplace, which you imagine probably came from the time when you actually wanted to sit in the ingle nook to keep warm. Well, when we first got here, we did the sort of easy bits. We did a bit of painting in the middle bedroom and also the sitting room, but we knew we couldn't tackle anything major because this is a sort of building which has been added onto over the years and has got wonderfully thick walls. You wouldn't believe how thick they are. So James had the notion to open it up.
We decided that we were going to get someone in to do the work, and so we started looking for an architect.
We really needed someone who could guide us though, because we're not experts in this. So through quite a long process, we found Communion, and they helped us. They guided us all the way from the beginning, which was brilliant. It was a lengthy process. It was longer than we thought. They were probably more detailed than we thought, but that certainly helped us, and then that helped us look back when we needed to. The reason we went with Communion was having seen the past projects they'd been involved with. It was the way they sensitively dealt with old buildings, but also opened things up.
We felt that Alex, it was, who came to see it, had the right sort of vision. He talked the right sort of language, and you could see from some of the projects he'd done online that the old buildings and so on and so forth, that he kind of knew what he was talking about. We had a rough idea of how much we were willing to spend, and we spoke about that with Alex. So I think he was able to work with that number and get something that suited what we wanted, roughly in that sort of budget level. I think even for him it was quite difficult to know, because you come up with the eventual plans, then you put it out to tender, and then you wait to see what comes back. So the way it worked was, after that initial meeting, we made the decision to work with Communion. Then Alex came back, and we had a much more detailed discussion about what we wanted, and he came with ideas already, having visited the property, which was good. We did some specific things. So we wanted to introduce a bathroom upstairs, as well as a shower room downstairs. And we wanted, the kitchen was tiny really, too small for us, and so we wanted to extend that out the way. So essentially, standing in the kitchen, which was the warmest room in the house, there was an aga thing there, so you spent a lot of time in there. It was A, dark, and B, you couldn't actually see the orchard, which was the whole reason for buying the place in the first place. So we wanted that kitchen extension so that we could actually look out over the property that we bought. So those were the real priorities. In order to achieve that, then the changing the direction of the staircase was an important thing, and that was an idea that Alex came with.
These days you can have large windows and large expanses of glass, and I guess when our house was built you couldn't, so there wasn't that much natural light in the building. Nothing wrong with that, lots of atmosphere, but it's a shame not to take advantage of the rather wonderful light we do get here in Herefordshire. So seeing other projects they'd done just online gave us the idea.
The building we're in is a smallish cottage, I guess, that has parts dating from the late 15th century, but it's been added on to over the years. And very recently, the bit we're sitting in was added on about 18 months ago. And so it's predominantly glass conservatory style extension to the kitchen, with large doors and a view over the orchard that we make our cider from.
So they were very clear about the various stages, and they were very clear about what they would contribute, what they wouldn't, but also what they could. So I think it's that coupled with, obviously the previous work. They very much came and spent a lot of time understanding what we wanted out here, which was good. And they didn't just understand it, they took it one step forward and they visualised how we could. We might have known what we wanted, that we wanted to change the bathroom configuration upstairs, but it was them that suggested changing the staircase. So there was practical flourishes and creative flourishes, but obviously the first step was understanding what we wanted. The sort of moment of revelation when they came back with the drawings and they'd reimagined the staircase, that was just phenomenal. And also, in a way, they reimagined upstairs, so giving us a family bathroom, which meant that our guests didn't have to traipse downstairs in the middle of the night, but also giving us more space in our bedroom, or perhaps using the space better. So that was like amazing.
Communion handled all the planning application for us, and it progressed fine and on time, really, and we got planning. Then after the planning permission was in place, and there was no restrictions on what we could do, the next process was to put out to tender. And the idea of that process was basically to get a number of companies to quote and then go with the one that offered the best price. And then there was one company who obviously keeps an eye on the planning applications and contacted Communion to see if they could be involved in the tender process. So Alex then checked out their work, was satisfied with their CV, as it were, and allowed them in, and they ended up being the ones who got the contract.
It's an organic process, so the fact that we were able to do things sequentially, so find the right architect, go through that process, approve things, and then get to the next stage, and then work with the builders. It would have been nice if it hadn't taken so long, we could have got back sooner, but I'm sure everyone would say that. I think when you are working with a really old building, you just have to be mindful that it is going to take longer. And if you want something sympathetic, something that's going to work well with the older parts of the building, you've just got to allow it to kind of happen. It has a bit of its own pace.
So that process, I guess, guaranteed that we would get good value for money. So we'd get a contractor who could definitely do it, and B, we get the cheapest one around. From the day they broke ground, I think it was 9 months was the total thing. It was supposed to be 6 months, I think. But as things progressed, there was a number of issues that were uncovered, as you can imagine in an old building. And you sort of you hope it won't happen, but you kind of half expect problems to be uncovered, and indeed they were. The project came in a little bit over budget, but I think that was only really because of the problems that were encountered. And also, we added the odd bit of work into it, so we hadn't planned to take off the plaster from the stonework and do that. These little issues, or big issues in some cases, added to the cost, but they needed to be done. Communion project managed it. So we moved out for the 9 months. It would have been impossible for us to stay here, really. We couldn't have project managed it because we don't have a clue about buildings. So yeah, it was great. I think it worked really well.
The kitchen was fine and was perfectly functional and everything, but it's meant that we can really live in this space and we can entertain in this space and we can share it with everyone. This has become the new heart of the home, and it's always wonderful to be in here, always.
I guess my advice to anyone doing this would be, don't rush into it. Live in the house and understand the real problems, and then when planning the build, take those into account, plus do anything else that you obviously want to do. But I think that's a really important thing, just to avoid A, wasted money, and B, wasted time. Building's a pain in the neck, really. It creates a lot of mess and noise and whatnot and inconvenience. The other thing is, if it's an old building, you're definitely going to encounter problems and unearth things that you weren't expecting. So you need to build in some sort of contingency into your budget. And depending on what it is and the size of the house, etc., you're going to have to be prepared to move out. So think about that. Not as easy as it might seem, especially if you've got pets, as we discovered. Yes, so I think the main things are really understand what it is you want to achieve before you start, and build in a bit of extra money.
I hope you really enjoyed that. I'd just like to say thank you to James and Suzanna for enabling us to share this. And my word, if you haven't tried the cider from Little Pomona, you need to go out and buy it. You can find it online. You can certainly find it in Herefordshire. But it's an international project, so it's absolutely fantastic cider, all made in Herefordshire, pretty much on site. A real treat. What I also got from this, they were just so delighted with the finished project. And for them to be able to live in the landscape that means so much to them is just an absolute delight. And the way that they just live in that house and they enjoy the sunshine and the views from it, the way they are able to invite guests into that space. I know that when they do their harvest, which is all done by hand, they invite friends and they stay in the house and stay in the landscape. It is a wonderful place to be. So I really hope you enjoyed that, enjoyed the insight into the design process, enjoyed the insight into the construction process, and have a look. We're doing a whole series of these podcasts. Just look to open up is just something that is really, really vital to the subject of architecture. Thanks so much for listening.